Gee, thanks, Nurse Joy.
There you go. Your Pokemon is all healthy, so take your Pokemon back.
Awesome, now me and Pikachu can go battle.
Great, we hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, wait, what did you say?
We hope to see you again soon.
Right, but this is a hospital. You can't actually mean...
We hope to see you again soon.
Hey, Pokemon Masters, Toby here, and Pokemon get sick a lot. The two biggest industries in the Pokemon world are Pokeballs and Pokemon Centers. They're everywhere. And in a world where the entire economy is based around trainers battling their Pokemon fainting, it makes sense that all of these Pokemon Centers are free. They would have to be. Looking after your Pokemon is just that important. So Pokemon Centers exist, items like Revive exists, and nowadays, when you do a Pokemon battle, your Pokemon's just gonna faint, and you're gonna restore its HP and it'll be absolutely fine. Apart from Blue's Raticate. That Raticate is definitely dead.
Wait, Toby, didn't we debunk that on my channel when we collabed a year ago? That said, Raticate's Pokedex entry does mention that it will slow down if its whiskers are cut off. After all, Pokemon are biological creatures, and they need to be properly looked after and cared for.
Oh hey Ron, and that sounds like the perfect segue into directing people who are starting here to, when they're done, check out the video that we've done over on your channel about how to take care of your Pokemon. We go really in depth. So when you're done here, after you've hit subscribe and like, click the link at the top of the description to head on over to Ron's video.
That's right, while over here, we'll be discussing some of the outcomes of what might happen to your Pokemon if you don't listen to the video on my channel. These won't all have Pokedex entries, nor will they all be conditions that result in death, although many do. Instead, treat this video as your guide into the more macabre side of the Pokemon world. Let's do it!
Let's go, roll intro. Right, so after looking at the general biology of all Pokemon, I've come up with 10 conditions that your average Pokemon trainer should be aware of. And if any of your Pokemon start suffering from these conditions, then maybe it's time to consider gifting away your Pokemon and hanging up your Pokeballs because your Pokemon deserve better. For example, condition number 1, rusting. You've seen rusting happen in the real world on the underside of your bike or car. It's when moisture interacts with the metal, oxidizing it, turning it into this reddish orange flakiness. What's happening here is a type of corrosion, and obviously this is going to massively affect Steel-type Pokemon.
So here are just a few examples of some Steel-type Pokemon that can be affected. When Aggron starts rusting, its symptoms can be relatively severe. It's completely covered in armor, but its joints are especially metallic, and if they rust, their mobility can become super limited. Not to mention, if their horns get too rusty, they may be less efficient when it comes to battle and hunting out in the wild. These symptoms can be applied to many similar Steel types.
Durant Steel is used as an armor plating against natural predators, which is kind of weird given that its main natural predator is Heatmor, a fire type, which with the addition of Steel makes it ineffective? Quad weak to Heatmor's attack, but I guess the primary thing it's trying to defend against is Heatmor being an anteater trying to eat it. And in this situation against Heatmor's teeth, armor is better than no armor, and a frailty to your armor is going to make you that much more vulnerable.
Klink and the other gear-based Pokemon will be unable to spin their gear as the rust gets in the way of their turning cogs. Not only will Klinklang not be able to physically attack, but it won't be able to create enough energy to release electricity-based moves from its spikes.
The worst case scenario though that I can think for any of these Pokemon is Fortress. Now, rust builds up slowly over time, so it's unlikely this would happen, but let's say a Fortress was sleeping for a long amount of time with its shell shut closed. Rust could build up in the joints and hinges of Fortress's body, or perhaps around the seal that connects the two parts of the shell, locking it in. And I don't think Fortress has any other way to, eat or breathe than if its shell's, not open. Potentially rust damage could affect Fortress in a way that it means that it's shut forever, and that would be a horrible way to go.
Next up is number 2, wilting. The soft parts of a plant, like its leaves and flowers, will begin to wilt and become less rigid if they're not absorbing enough water into their cells. Lower water availability can cause high salinity, or salt, to diffuse from the plant cells and cause shrinkage and perhaps even bacteria and fungi to clog up the plant's vascular system. Wilting is actually a mechanism that helps conserve water in these desperate times, but permanent wilting leads to plant death, and in the Pokemon world, the loss of your Pokemon.
Now, any Pokemon with foliage is a potential target here. Grass-type Pokemon tend to take the biology of both animals and plants, and the main thing that they tend to take from plants is the need for nutrients, sunlight, water to be absorbed. Let's take Sunkern for example. According to its Pokedex entries, it likes to stay as still for possible, which makes sense. It's a seed Pokemon. It likes to plant itself underground and absorb those nutrients. And of course, taking in sunlight with the leaves on its head. However, what if those leaves were to not get sunlight? What if they weren't able to get water and it planted itself in somewhere sandy, for example? Let's just say that Sunkern isn't getting the nutrients. Its foliage is going to fall apart and it's just going to be a starving Sunkern husk. I wonder how many of these are sitting underneath National Park. Yeah, that's really dark.
I mean, it may not even be just Sunkern. Bulbasaur won't evolve if it doesn't get enough sunlight to bathe its seed. It absorbs sunlight using the chloroplast in its bulb, considering the seed is completely covered. So if its bulb wilts, it may complicate, prolong, or even halt evolution.
But forget about just halting evolution, Lotad depends on its broadleaf to survive. Not only do all of its abilities in all of its evolutionary stages rely on this broadleaf taking in rainwater, allowing it to restore health or move faster with Swift Swim, but this broadleaf, its health is tied to that of the Pokemon, and according to its Pokedex entry, if the Lotad grows weak, its broadleaf starts to die. And to be quite frank, without its broadleaf, I can't imagine that it would ever grow back or get better.
Why is that? Cause the worst case scenario is simply the loss of leaves or even an appendage, since the limbs of some grass types are leaves. Most grass types get their energy by absorbing sunlight using their leaves, so no leaves means no photosynthesis, and that means no food.
Next up and third on our list is overgrowth, and this is a problem that can present itself in any number of ways. When talking about trees and plants in the real world, overgrowth can be a problem. A tree that casts over the forest might deprive saplings of sunlight. Or you could take domesticated sheep and goats that need shearing, or horns that need cutting into shape so that they don't accidentally grow in a way that they might hurt the users of the horns. Domesticated horses as well have their hooves shaved into shape because overgrowth can be a problem for them.
In the Pokemon world, that means that a Pokemon like Dubwool will have the inability to move if not sheared regularly. Alolan Dugtrios, who have evolved to move quickly through the ground, won't be able to survive as easily if its hairs get tangled with its brothers.
Dugtrio getting tangled up in knots is a problem that I well know. But let's take another look at those grass-type Pokemon. For example, Torterra. What would happen if the tree on its back grew too big? Torterra is pretty bulky, but what happens if that tree gets too heavy or if its roots start interacting with Torterra's nervous system? That could be how the biology of the Pokemon works. I can only imagine that if Torterra's tree grew too big or if a second tree started to grow, it would become too heavy for the Torterra. And we know plant overgrowth is real. When we look to Tangrowth, its Pokedex entry says that its growth is accelerated in warm climates and its vines grow really long, but it has a method of cutting those vines off for itself. But a whole tree for Torterra? I don't think so, and that's gonna lead to a Torterra that is unable to move. Just gonna completely collapse, even with them thick tree thighs.
Speaking of legs, not the best segue, it's also a little known fact that hooves will keep on growing if not cut, but wild hooved Pokemon are constantly running over hard or rough terrain, which naturally wears their hooves down. A tame hooved Pokemon will need hoof attention, or it could get out of hand and prevent proper mobility and even lead to injury.
The worst case scenario here, of course, is that any Pokemon can't move, but I kind of have a special case I want to talk about. This is more of an honorable mention, and I'm going to give you a grossness warning. If you don't want to see this, you want to skip to this time code, but I'm going to show you something called a Rat King. Grossness warning in 3, 2, 1. This is a Rat King. This is a phenomenon that people don't even know if it's necessarily real or if it's a hoax. There are specimens in museums. How does this happen? Why does this happen? Well, lots of rats huddling together to keep warm in the cold. Their tails getting tangled together. Maybe there's some sticky substance on their tails, sticking them together, and then they start to get entangled. And then as the rats grow, they grow into a Rat King. Really nasty way to go, and obviously this would affect Rattata and Raticate, but any other rat-like Pokemon with tangly tails, I'm thinking of cuties like Dedenne, could have a real problem with this.
The fourth condition is electric overload. When too much electrical current passes through electrical wires, or in our case, an electric type's electric sac, they can overheat. In the real world, this causes fires. In the Pokemon world, your electric types will get a fever. In general, exposure to high levels of electromagnetic energy can cause electrical overcharge, like Pikachu had in the episode Hoenn Alone. Severe cases cause the Pokemon to become red-eyed, aggressive, and dangerous towards its trainer. The Magnemite line is thankfully immune, unlike almost any other Pokemon with an electric sac.
And And how can we talk about electric problems without talking about electric and Electros and Chinchou? These Pokemon are known to, as well as I know living in caves when it comes to electric, they live in the water, and that is a dangerous place for electricity to be. In fact, in the real world, electric eels do pose a threat to others of their own species as well as other fish around them, and a sharp jolt to the heart would kill an electric eel. They even shock themselves sometimes, so if you had a Chinchou or an Electros and they were overcharged going through the water, they would be dangerous to themselves and everything around them.
However, this is seriously dangerous for young electric-type Pokemon, unequipped to deal with a huge surge of energy like Pichu. They can honestly explode. This is obviously a worst-case scenario, just like any Pokemon who is weak to electricity using an electric-type move. A very unskilled Hawlucha using a Thunder Punch could potentially electrocute itself.
Number 5, the condition that I want to talk about here is cracked gems, and this is a problem that really doesn't make sense in the real world because it's mostly rooted in deep fantasy. You know how magicians have wands and broomsticks, seers into the future might use a crystal ball, in Skyrim you use your petty soul gems to contain the souls of those that you've defeated. In fantasy, using a gem or a totem of some kind to imbue it with magic or to wield magic is a pretty popular thing, and it doesn't stop with Pokemon. There are all sorts of Pokemon that use totems and specifically gems to channel their magic.
If the gem of a Slowking, Espeon, Golduck, or Persian is cracked or broken, they may misdirect their powers, causing their moves to hit unintended targets like themselves. They may even lose their connection to the supernatural, almost like cutting off their third eye.
Starmie is much the same, but its gem has two other purposes. One, it seems to be the center of this Pokemon's ability to use the move Recover, and in the animated series we do see Raticate crunch right into the gem, so we know it can break. See, Starmie's gem has another purpose which is even more interesting. Starmie here, not the master of linguistics, you can only get so far in conversation with the odd So instead, according to its Pokedex entries, Starmie uses its gem core to communicate and beam signals into the night sky, possibly to other space Pokemon, which is where it's said to have come from. But I can only imagine with a cracked gem that level of communication is gonna have some issues, and that Starmie might not be able to talk to each other. Hurrah! Hurrah!
Sableye's eyes are gems, and any cracks in them could cause, at best, fragmented sight, and at worst case, total blindness. Kaleidoscope vision seems cool at first, but it gets pretty annoying after an hour.
In most cases, when it comes to cracked gems, a lot of these Pokemon are special attackers, and not having access to their special attack, well, that's huge, because creatures don't evolve to be jacks of all trades or just experts in every single field. Creatures evolve to specialize into niches where they fit in. Most birds have been able to use their wings to fly. Take away their wings and you have a bird falling through the sky. Sorry, that's really dark imagery. The point is, though, that you have the same here. If a Pokemon has evolved into a niche where it needs to use its special attack to survive, if you take away its ability to use its special attacks, it becomes vulnerable. Sorry, just as a bird keeper, I'm getting really affected by the imagery of that last bit. Let's move on.
The sixth condition is erosion. Natural elements like water, earth, fire, and wind slowly damage rocks and could seriously affect wild Pokemon who are covered in minerals like rock types.
Now, of course, you've got your Geodudes, Onyxes, and of course, Sudowoodo, who would absolutely hate this. All of these Pokemon have rock bodies and they hate the feel of water. But to put it into perspective for you, it's kind of like if we got like just a vat of acid, very slow dissolving acid, mind, just thrown on us. It would sting, it would hurt, and it makes me feel really, really not good about how Ash won his Pewter City Gym badge. Like that poor Onyx. And that's just a stinging sensation, because in battle, you use a Hydro Pump or a Hydro Cannon, these rock Pokemon are getting hit with water at high velocity. It's just absolutely guaranteed to chip away at their bodies.
There are also Pokemon who rely on their rock armor. For example, Rhyhorn's situation is similar to what we talked about with the steel types. But what would be worse is water getting into small crevices. Rhyperior has holes in its arms, and if not drained of water, internal damage can develop and eat away at whatever organs are part rock. At the very least, it could prevent it from precisely shooting rocks out of its arms.
Another kind of unique example of this is the Pokemon Pupitar. It's the pupa stage between Larvitar and Tyranitar, and if it's anything like Kakuna or Metapod, then what's happening inside the hard encased shell is a gooey mess as the creature tries to metamorphise metamorphosize into a new creature, going from a Caterpie to a Butterfree, or in this case from a Larvitar into a Tyranitar. What's inside Pupitar's shell is goo. The Pokemon is literally rearranging and changing its cellular structure. So, if a crack appeared in the armor due to water damage, for example, and water got in, being a liquid, the water might push the goo, the Pupitar, out onto the floor.
That's pretty nasty, but the next one is painful. Roggenrola may succumb to one of the worst case scenarios. Its face is just one giant ear. If that is somehow damaged, it can become partially deaf, or worse, completely lose its ability to perceive its surroundings, and therefore die from hunger, predators, impacts, or steep drops.
Next up, at number 7 on this list, is heat damage, and we humans are an excellent example of this. I am here, the sun is there, sort of just off camera, and between me and the sun is the ozone layer, 93 million miles, and maybe some sun cream on a hot day. And that is sadly still not enough to protect from the amount of, for example, skin cancers that can develop as the result of heat damage, or, for example, just heat stroke in general, which, anecdotally, I can tell you is awful. The sun, while absolutely fantastic and a giver of life, is also incredibly destructive. It is just that strong, it affects all biological life, and that would include Pokemon as well.
Zubat absolutely needs shade from light and heat. Too much exposure to the sun can burn its skin, or in worst case, cause skin cancer. It's a nocturnal cave-dwelling mammal, so being out in daylight probably makes it a target to predators anyways, so please leave it in the shade.
Of course, a way that many animals and Pokemon would deal with heat damage is by sweating and panting. This is a way of expelling heat through the form of water. But Hippopotas has a very unique way of sweating. According to its Pokedex entries, it sweats instead not with water, but with sands. It perspires sand. This sand is then used to create a veil to protect it against germs and bacteria. But here's the thing. We humans sweat a water-like substance because we drink water. There's water in our lives. It's the same for all animals. Hippopotas lives in the desert, so it's surrounded by sand that it can intake, it eats it, and then it sweats it back out. That works. But take a Hippopotas out of the desert. Don't give it access to sand. Take it on your journey with you to Snow Point City. And suddenly your Hippopotas loses its way of expelling heat, meaning it might even overheat in a city like that. And even if it doesn't then have the sand to protect it against germs, so it may catch a cold in the cold.
There are many Pokemon like Tentacool and Goomy that can dehydrate when outside of water or in the intense sun. They will begin to shrivel up if their mostly water bodies are not taken care of. Amphibian Pokemon, especially with the dry skin ability like Krogunk, can't be soaking up the sun. Oddly enough, Heliolisk, who gets damaged by the intense sun with the dry skin ability, needs to bathe in the sun in order to gain power, just like reptiles in general. And some amphibian Pokemon who in the real world would need to be wet are actually fire types like Charmander and Salandit.
It really seems odd how these Pokemon can survive out of their environments, and of course, how can we talk about heat damage and not talk about ice-bodied Pokemon? We've got Avalugg, Cryogonal, Glalie, just to name a few. These Pokemon are like they have ice for their bodies. And yeah, it makes sense that an Avalugg would be able to exist in Arctic waters, but what happens when you take it to the desert resort in Sinnoh? And it's not obviously that unusual for Pokemon to be prone to the occasional Fire Blast attack. These Pokemon are going to melt and die. Throw out your Castelia cones and hello to a bottle of fresh water.
Number 8 is fire-related. Fire-type Pokemon need to keep their external, or in most cases, internal flame going. In the real world, fire burns because combustible fuel rapidly oxidizes in the presence of oxygen, releasing heat and energy. This can either be heat produced from friction, like with a match or flint, or it could be heat in the atmosphere caused by the sun. While we don't have any animals that can breathe fire, fire types can, in one way or another, expel fire from their bodies. But of course, if you can starve a fire of its oxygen or fuel source, its power is weakened.
Take almost any fire Pokemon. The fire must be coming from somewhere in their bodies, and when you look at Pokedex entries of Charmander, Torchic, and Flareon, you learn about a thing called a flame sac. This flame sac must exist somewhere in their bodies, producing the fuel that they then burn and expel. But what happens if this flame sac were to rupture? I mean, Torchic's Pokedex entry specifically is absolutely adorable. It's got the flame sac which keeps the fire in its body, so it's warm to hug. But what happens when that fire gets out of control? Would it cause the Pokemon to ignite and combust? Can Combustion? No, I try to make a joke, but this is way too morbid. Surely not every part of the Pokemon's body should be on fire at all time, and so that means that yes, if fire got out of control, the Pokemon just might ignite into flames.
Some Pokemon will produce smoke instead of fire when they're sick, like Cyndaquil. This can be due to the lack of oxygen or fuel, causing internal fire to combust incompletely, creating smoke.
Pokemon with exposed flames, like many of the starter Pokemon, they run the risk of burning themselves and others. Charmander has a Pokedex entry just kind of talking about how the babies are unfamiliar with the power of their flames and they risk of burning each other. So fire Pokemon can get burned by exposed flames, and this is just like accidental. Maybe with a Charmander it's not so bad, but what happens when Charizard swings its tail over its nest clumsily? Or what happens when you're standing behind your Typhlosion giving it a pat on the back and it will ignite its flames accidentally, just clumsily, just a reaction of shock, and burns your hand off. This is genuinely very terrifying, given that for all of the fire starter Pokemon, the Pokemon that you as a trainer should first get and get to grips with before you're capturing other life forms, almost all of them have exposed flames.
The worst case scenario is internal gas buildup. Looking at a Pokemon like Charmander, what is its fuel? A likely candidate is methane, a creature whose body wouldn't allow it to physically fly in the real world like Charizard, considering it lacks a keel and wyvern wings, may be using methane to drive its ascension. So if methane exists, there is a possibility of buildup in the body when it isn't expelling flames. This could be extremely toxic if left untreated for some time.
Right then, for our penultimate one, we should take a little look at bacterias in the Pokemon world. Bacterias are small microbes. They're these little life forms that can be both beneficial and terrible for you. Viruses, of course, as we know by Pokerus, also exist in Pokemon, but viruses are much, much smaller than bacteria. We're really going to focus on the bacteria here. And yeah, I mean, bacteria cause us problems all the time, as well as helping us out. And we know bacteria exist in the world of Pokemon. Stunfisk has a Pokedex entry, for example, talking about how the bacteria in the mud where it wallowed allowed it to develop the organ that produces electricity. Barboach has a slimy film on it to protect it from germs. So we know bacteria exist in the Pokemon world, but what happens when things go wrong with them?
Take Lantern, for example. It's nicknamed the Deep Sea Star for its illuminated antenna. This Pokemon produces light by causing a physical reaction between bacteria and its bodily fluids inside the antenna. However, if its bacteria were to somehow die out, its antenna won't illuminate. This is a death sentence considering it uses the light to lure in prey. So special antibiotics are necessary when Lanterns are sick, as to not kill off the bacteria it needs.
But the most wild example of this is a Pokemon that will die without germs, and that is Grimer. According to its Pokedex entry, it's born in the bottom of the ocean when toxic substances come together. I say it with confusion because I need to double check. It emerged from sludge on a polluted seabed. There you go. But it also has a Pokedex entry that says in a sterile environment, the germs in its body can't multiply. They need disgust and sludge and toxins. Because in a sterile environment, if they can't multiply, then the Pokemon itself will die. So yeah, that was pretty cut and dry. It's just obviously weird that you think of germs and bacteria as being bad, but specifically for Grimer, it's very, very good.
And finally, number 10, shedding. Animals like bugs and reptiles shed for various purposes. Usually it's to allow for further growth. A reptile will shed to remove parasites and replace skin as it stretches while aging. An insect usually sheds when its body becomes too big for its exoskeleton. This process makes them vulnerable, but it's the only way to grow a new, more comfortable exoskeleton. But sometimes shedding can stop midway, or some patches of skin don't completely come off. This will definitely cause problems in the Pokemon world.
Shed skin Pokemon like Ekans and Scraggy and other reptiles like Trico could all face big problems if their shedding goes wrong, specifically over their big eyes. These reptiles have eyes of this size so that they can locate prey and be aware of predators, but when shedding, if their shed gets stuck over their eyelids, they'll have a retained eyelid. It's a protective scale that they usually have over their eyes that if it doesn't shed with the rest of their body will be there, and of course that's going to mess up their vision, but also it's dead skin cells around their eyes, so that can cause a lot of like bacterial infections and that kind of thing. Very much not good, so look out, because this could lead to a very blind Trico.
Inadequate humidity levels affect shedding, since more moisture in the air allows the skin to peel off smoothly. If a Pokemon is ill during its shedding season, then it will struggle to completely shed. This could be a real problem for Silicobra and Sandaconda, whose noses are a huge utility to them in battle. It'll be devastating if the process halts right at their noses. Blocked noses can stop them from spewing sand and will clog up their entire system.
For many bug Pokemon, shedding is a natural part of their life cycle. In fact, shedding is what a cocoon is doing when the butterfly, or in this case, Butterfree and Beedrill emerge. But what happens if the shed gets stuck halfway between the stages? You're gonna have a Butterfree carrying around a Metapod on its butt. This, of course, is going to severely impact the bug Pokemon's ability to fly around, and thus its ability to just be effective in general, and probably make it a bigger snack for predators like Pidgeot. I also love this idea of a Pokemon stuck in between two phases of evolution.
Evolution-related shedding seems to cause one of the strangest worst-case scenarios out there. What if Ninjask becomes stuck mid-shed? Will it be fused with a newly created Shedinja? Or perhaps this isn't even possible since Shedinja could only appear after the skin is completely shed. I mean, this isn't my video, so it's not my job to find out. Toby will have to address it someday.
Yeah, I'm loving the idea of some twisted Fakemon designs, but hopefully none of this will ever happen to any of your Pokemon, of course.
So make sure to head on over to my channel where we talk about all the ways you will need to take care of your Pokemon in order to prevent the physical or even psychological illnesses Pokemon could develop.
Thank you for watching, and of course, soar high, Pokemon Masters.
This is Ash Ketchum. You just watched a video by Birdkeeper Toby. That makes you a Pokemon Master.
A tremendous thank you to those of you who are supporting this channel financially, whether that's through merchandise or Twitch subscriptions or, of course, Patreon. And a big thank you to the big patrons of this month, JD Gottlich and Michael Hornschurch. Thank you.